Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby. Welcome to Hump Day. It is the Wednesday edition of the Michael Dukes Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, and live around the world as well on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll go to find our audio-only live stream and links to our social media sites and so much more. It's all there. It's all there. It's all ready to roll. It's all good stuff. Good morning and welcome to it. We got some good stuff for you today. We're going we're going to be joined in hour 2 this morning by Representative Jeremy Bynum, who is going to come on and talk about, a lot of stuff. I mean, primarily, I've invited several legislators and politicians on to talk about their veto override vote. We had Will Stapp on previously. We had Mike Cronk on, and still working on trying to get Justin Ruffridge on. I want to talk to Rob Yunt, trying to reach out to Julie Colomb. Just the characters that were here that were listed specifically in this ADN article from a couple weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, I guess, where they basically got commentary from almost every legislator on the Republican side of the minority that voted in favor of overriding the governor's veto. And I did that because I want to have a little bit of a deeper conversation than a one or two paragraph discussion on this, I guess I should say. And so Jeremy is going to be joining us again, the representative from Ketchikan, House District 1, and he's going to be joining us to talk about the override, and we're going to talk about where do we go from here. Because again, we're seeing all this posturing, and we're seeing a lot more kind of above the table conversation from people who are in the educational industry, who are basically saying, well, this is just the beginning. This is the more to come. We're reaching deeper into the kitty next time. It's kind of the theme from what we've been seeing. And we'll get into that here in just a bit as we delve down into some of the repercussions of the veto override and what's happening with that money. We'll have a little bit more info here as we go through. So we're going to talk with him in hour 2 this morning as well. I've got some other headlines I'm going to get to in hour 1, but I also want to let you know that tomorrow on the program, we're going to be joined by We're going to be joined by Rob Myers, who is going to be coming on the program to talk about SJR 14 on Thursday. That's tomorrow at 7:05. And I'm sure we'll talk about some other stuff as well. I'm sure we'll cover all the usual bases, which will include the latest, because Rob and I really haven't had a chance much to discuss the latest report on the oil pricing and oil revenue projections, which we discussed in detail yesterday with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Both the EIA and the IEA, if you can keep all that straight, are talking about where oil pricing is going, and we've talked about what the effect is on the state. I put out a couple of YouTube shorts yesterday specifically about this. It's just another reason why you probably should subscribe and follow me on YouTube, because I've started to put out YouTube shorts on some of the hot issues of the day and things that I believe that people should be paying attention to. And the shorts give you an ability to just share a short little blurb with somebody who maybe, I've got the attention span of a gnat. So I know sometimes if I go on YouTube, it's to watch a video that's a minute or minute and a half just to kind of get the gist of what's going on. And so now I'm putting up those shorts, and I'll be doing that moving forward here probably on a daily basis. I'll be dropping 1 or 2 shorts every day or two so that we could try and concise down and capsulize some of the big problems that we're facing in the state. Because there are some problems. And again, I feel like sometimes we are in doom and gloom mode, but at the same time, we've been talking about these issues for a long time, and they've just been moving slowly, inexorably forward. And it's not that I want to sit around and tell people I told you so, because what I wanted to do is stop. But unfortunately, human nature being such as it is, I fully believe that unless we can turn some things around, what's going to happen is we will eventually have to hit the brick wall, and then we'll be left to pick up the pieces. If we could just slow down before we hit the wall, that would be great. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying, in this show and in my daily life and everything else. I'm just trying to find a way to slow us down so that when we hit the brick wall, we don't absolutely explode. I don't know if that's a great metaphor or analogy or not, but you get the picture. So tomorrow it will be Rob Myers and potentially another guest as well. Again, still working on some of our other legislators, see if we can get them on to discuss this veto override. On Friday, we're going to have Robin Sandoval is going to be joining us. Robin is a firearms instructor, enthusiast, and she is the founder of I've just forgot what it was. Doggone it. Gun Girl, I think it's gun it all right. It's just one of those things where I can't. There we go. A girl and a gun. There we go. It wasn't Gun Girl. It was a girl and a gun. And that's an organization that focuses, of course, on female shooting and female enthusiasm for the firearms sports. So there we go. That's the rest of the week, all lined up and ready to go. So we will. I'm sorry, Rick is just over here, just helping me, overflowing with positive enthusiasm. Rick in the chat room said, MD, you'll be talking about this screwed up state of government until you put the old mic on the shelf. Thanks, Rick. I mean, it's great. It's really great. Okay. So, it's going to be good stuff. What are we going to be covering here in hour 1? Well, as I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about the education and the funding. And now that those funds are being released and the school districts are out there picking them up, what are they doing with them? That'll be one point of discussion. We're also going to talk a little bit about the special session. All 66 seconds of it or whatever it is. We're going to talk about that. We'll give you the rundown on what's been going on. There was a grand jury. There was a town hall meeting about the grand juries that Treg Taylor attended. And it well, we'll get into the details of that, but there's some interesting stuff. Governor Dunleavy's got an opinion piece that was covered in the Daily Caller, and it was an opinion piece about a return to ranked choice voting. And it's really a pretty good piece. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, you should go out and track it down. I guess I'll make it easy for you by dropping a link in the chat room. And the headline reads, "Why I Support a Return to Traditional Elections." He starts off by saying, I've got to acknowledge a simple fact. I've been elected governor under both systems. I won under the traditional system and again under ranked choice voting. So my position on this issue is not about political gain or loss. It's about trust, clarity, and confidence in our electoral process. And I think that's part of the key, is the confidence in the electoral process. I think that's where a lot of people have some heartburn over ranked choice voting, not to mention the fact that it is kind of engineered and geared toward, towards the more moderate to liberal mindset in the way that it, again, philosophically, we've talked about that, right? That there's two different philosophies in governance that we're seeing in our country anyway, as far as, I'm trying to break it down to its simplest terms. The bottom line is there's two different philosophies. On the more progressive side, you have a very kumbaya, it takes a village, esprit de corps, anything for the team kind of feeling, where they are willing to, suborn some of their own stuff to make sure it's for the good of the group and all that. Whereas on the more conservative side, we got a bunch of wild cowboys, rugged individualists who don't play well with others, who even when they're grouped together have a tendency to turn inward and shoot themselves, circle the wagons and shoot inward kind of thing. And that's how we ended up in the first go around with the whole Begich, Palin, Peltola thing, because, somebody wouldn't back down. Now, we seem to be getting better at that with the Nancy Dahlstrom withdrawing from the Begich, Peltola race in the last go around. But it's kind of, from a philosophical sense, ranked choice voting is kind of built to, to cater to more that kind of kumbaya, we'll work together, we'll only put up one candidate kind of thing. But this article from the governor is got some good points in it, and you should go out and take a listen to it. Why hasn't the governor been doing stuff like this from the beginning? Why hasn't he been engaging the public? This is an old complaint, but I don't want to rehash. Well, I do want to rehash. This is one of my main problems with Mike Dunleavy. I think he's a great guy. I like him. I've liked some of his policies. But the problem is that he has just not been engaging the public in these discussions over all this time. I really, really wish he had been taking and using the bully pulpit that he has as governor, especially. And there was a short period of time there where he started doing those, they weren't lives. They weren't, they were like Facebook lives or whatever, where he'd go in and do a not a rant, but he'd do like an informational dump, on Facebook Live or something. And I thought, oh man, this is going to be great, because they won't all be, fantastic, but at least he'll be engaging with the public. And that lasted for like 5 seconds. And then it was radio silence, crickets. I've stopped trying now, I'll be honest with you. But for a year, I tried to get the governor on the program for almost a year. Every time it would be like, oh yeah, he'll get back. Oh yeah, we'll do so. And the last time I had him on, he was on the program for like 12 minutes or something. Well, he's got other commitments. Look, I understand. But, when we had him on the program during the election cycle and everything, my question was, will you come on the show and sit down? And my show is long form. My show is not normally, it's 10 minutes and you're done. We have some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, this is a 1 hour conversation. Start at the top of the hour. We take a couple breaks. We go all the way to the end of the hour. That's the way it is. That's the way it's been for years. So it's not a big surprise when I say I'd like to have you on for an hour, and they're like, oh, he can give you 7.35 minutes. Because you know what happens in that 7.35, 12, or 14.4? You know what happens? They get their talking points out, and the questions always somehow, my questions always get wrapped back around to whatever their talking point is. And then they leave. And we're always left with more questions than we started with. It's definitely irritating. Okay, I don't want to get I'm done. I'm done with that. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna use this as an opportunity to stop the rant. All right, we're gonna continue in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back with more. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free things, free thinking radio. Free Things Radio. We'll be back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. All right. What do we got here? Scroll backwards. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Let's see. On the hot seat with Michael Dukes. Yeah, buddy. Going backwards. Okay, good morning. A lot of good mornings. Good morning to you all. Thank you for coming in, especially my dad. Chris says he follows me, but my shorts rarely make it into your feed. Well, I've only got a handful of shorts out there. There was a handful from last year and thing, but now I'm starting to be more consistent. I've made a commitment to myself to be more consistent. And thanks to the help of StreamYard and its AI function of helping me clip things down and making it easy, I'm doing it that way as well. So yesterday I put out 2, the day before that, or the week I put one out last week, but I'm going to be putting one out, hopefully one a day, every couple days, something like that. But it basically, it's just cut downs of the show, and it's the pertinent salient point that I'm trying to make in the cut down for the show. So there you go. All right. Stay away from the brick wall. Stay away from the aqua. And Rick said, "You're welcome," after he told me that, I'm going to just be dead and gone when they're still talking about this state stuff. Good morning. Headstone, says Brian. Taxation is theft. As insult to injury, it will be overgrown. Deferred maintenance strikes back. Yeah, that's right. I'll have taxation is theft on my tombstone, and the whole graveyard will be overrun because somebody deferred the maintenance on it because they needed it for some social program, right? Kevin McCabe says the entire nation thinks that Alaska loves a ranked choice. We've got to get rid of that stupidness. If you've not signed the petition, please find one and sign it. Matsu Republican Women's Club and many businesses have them at the fair. See, Frank says in Fairbanks, the school board will spend some of their funds on nice things to have because it makes them feel good and warm and fuzzy. But the board, oh, I think it's the board, not the broad. Unless you're talking about the broads, the board will tell you we have to cut to the bone. We had to make hard decisions. Yeah, no, it's all right. Anthony's got a good idea. Anthony says, I say that government office should be assigned like jury duty. You'd have to call into your job and be like, I'm not going to be at work this week, boss. I've got governor duty. This is true. MD, what governor has met your standards of Alaska governor? God, I hate to say it, but probably year one of Dunleavy wasn't bad. Year one, before he rolled over and kind of wet on himself. Before it was when he had Donna Ardwin in the whole group. Palin was actually pretty good overall. She got a little crazy, when she got nominated for the thing, but Palin was not bad overall. I mean, I have some problem with aces and some of the other stuff, but overall, not bad. Anybody before that? No, not that I can think of. I guess that's it for right now. Somebody said, where is that? Where's the comment? Does anybody know that the Education Task Force won't have a decision? Where was that comment? I meant to start as it went by. Here it is. Did everyone realize the Education Task Force won't come to any sort of determination until early 2027? Have they stated that? Because I thought they were having the task force meeting now to be able to discuss it in the upcoming legislative session. Is there some kind of published thing where it says they won't have a determination until 2 years from now? I'm Chris. Can you cite your sources there for me, buddy, so I know where it is? The more you share, the more your bowl will be plentiful. Yeah, Baratna. All right. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common Sense. Could you tell what I've been watching? Common Sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Here we go.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Yes, Teresa, thank you. I forgot. Somebody asked me about, well, who do I think was a good governor? And I miss Jay Hammond. Jay Hammond was a great governor. He really was. Now, a little before my time, I was pretty young. I was barely into double digits or just approaching double digits when Hammond was in office. So again, little before my time, but you get the point. All right. Sorry. I spend the entire commercial break talking with the chat room, and it completely derails my train of thought because I was like, okay, I want to go to this next. And then I forget. 6 minutes later, I'm like, what was I talking about again? This must be what happens when you, well, I don't know. This must be what happens sometimes when you get older. You can't remember anything. Okay. Covered that. Special session. That's what I wanted to talk about. The special session, the special technical session. Yeah. So, let's see. The ADN reports that, where is it? It was a less than 1 minute floor session. The technical session, the Senate floor session, the House floor session, which included Bryce Edgmond, Chuck Kopp, who is the majority leader, and Kathy Tilton, who is the minority whip, lasted less than 60 seconds. The Senate session, which included Gary Stevens and Bert Stedman, apparently just the two of them, lasted just over 60 seconds. So in a combined total of less than 2 minutes, they have now adjourned, not gavelled out, but adjourned until August 31st. And why are they doing that? Because they're terrified that the governor is going to call them back into special session immediately. Which I suppose is a possibility. It's funny because in the KTUU article, the governor, when asked whether he would call another special session, said possibly. And I don't know if he's doing that just to kind of hang the sword of Damocles out over them or not, but he said, I'll always reserve the tools afforded to me by the Constitution of Alaska to get policy done and to move the state forward. So we'll see what happens. And that's the whole point, was that He had specific goals by calling the special session. I think there were some underlying political goals, which we've talked about, I don't know, not ad nauseum, but we've talked about a bit here on the program. I think it was a political move in the fact that he wanted the veto override to be well out and beyond where the session starts, so they couldn't use it as a point of leverage. Or as a talking point, any kind of momentum builder going into the new session. But will he bring them back in? It's interesting to see, because he wanted to talk about HB and SB 1001, 1002, and 1003. These were bills that he had put forward with the special session call. 1001 expands enrollment options and authorizes the State Board of Ed and Early Development to approve charter schools. It also creates an after-school literacy tutoring grant program and provides for recruitment and retention incentives, read bonuses, for teachers. By God, you'd think that sounds like good stuff for anybody who's involved in education, right? No, we don't want to talk about that. 1002 establishes a 5-year pilot program for demonstration of the state tribal education compact schools, which, again, you would think would be positive for these compact schools going in between the intertribal and the state. And then 1003 extends tax credits to qualifying contributions to create a durable funding stream for tribal compact schools afforded under 1002. But see, none of these bills ever got even pulled out of the drawer. None of them got off the. I mean, these sessions lasted less. I mean, the original session lasted 22 minutes. That included the override, right? Because I got the notification that the vote had been done, that the override was done. I got it at 22 minutes after the. That's how. No, we're done. So it never even got drug out of the drawer. Nobody even looked at it. Nobody even read it. Why bother? We're just going to override it. So what's going on with the governor's programs, with the things that he wants? I mean, what's going on with the policy? And again, this is my major heartburn with all this education stuff, and the fact that the proponents of the increased BSA and everything else, they refuse to discuss. They refuse to discuss policy. It's strictly about funding. And quite honestly, it reminds me of a kid, no, I want it now. No reasoning, no discussion, it's just basically, I want my lolly and I want it now. And in this case, they want the booty. I want the lucre. Give me the money. I want it now. We'll talk about policy later. That's, from a negotiation standpoint, that doesn't sound really great, right? Now, the next time that these items that the governor has been brought up will be in 5 days, when the task force on education funding meets for the first time in Anchorage. Now, that's all well and good, but who is part of the task force? I mean, it just looks like the task force has been handpicked by some representative from the AEA or the NEA, because it's made up of former teachers, legislators, or former teachers, union people, things. I mean, and then somebody in the chat room just said, and I got to go look back in the chat room to see if he replied to me, because there was a comment that said, Chris Hayes, it's the Alaska Beacon article. So I'll verify this, but Chris made the comment earlier that said, did you realize that there won't be any recommendations from the education committee until early 2027? Now, it was my understanding that they were having the education task force meeting now because they wanted to have this information ready for the new session. But you're telling me they're going to start meeting in 5 days and they won't have a recommendation until 18 months from now? Okay, so this was all just political theater. That's what this was. This was not like the fiscal policy working group where they, everybody slaved over it and then they tried to present it at the end of the summer and into the beginning of the next session. No, this is a delaying tactic. Sure, we'll create an education task force. Sure, we'll go over it for a few days and then we'll wait a year and a half before we give you recommendations. I mean, really? And then we look at what they're doing with the money. And again, Joe Allgood over at KTUU writes this piece, and it's good. It's concise. I love when we get good, concise information. It says, after receiving the roughly $10 million from the state following a special session veto override, the Anchorage School Board revised their annual budget during their first meeting. This topic of hiring came up during a work session on Tuesday alongside the budget discussion. While the district said that the number of vacancies on the first day of school, 122 vacancies, was lower than the year prior, Superintendent Bryant said the trend of high vacancies is abnormal and hopes that new funding will prevent that. So, first of all, can we do a little math here? Can I bust you down and do just a little bit of math? They received $10 million from the state following the special session veto override. Now we know the override, the veto override was about $50 million. Okay. That's roughly, because he vetoed $200 out of 700, $50 million you get. So it's $25 million per $100 increase. It's about $25 million per $100 increase to the BSA. Is that clear as mud? So after the veto override, they got their $10 million. Now, again, that was about a quarter to a third of the overall, because it was a $700 increase. So they actually had already gotten their $500 million per student increase. This was just the remaining $200 million. Right? Or $200 of the $500 of the $700. Jeez Louise, man, this morning is numbers all over the place. $700 increase, $200 was vetoed. The school district already got the $500. Now they get the additional $200. Does that make sense? So the school district already had $20 million. If these numbers are true, if it's the $10 million, roughly $10 million following the veto override, that was new money. That was nearly $20 million in new money. What's going on? And that money was, back when the governor signed the thing, because then Bryant, school district, the superintendent, we could start hiring teachers going into next year on the normal teacher hiring cycle. It's not normal, nor I believe should it be acceptable that districts only have 2 weeks to hire these teachers. You had the lion's share of this money, because he only vetoed a portion of it back in, what was it, May? You had the lion's share of this money ahead of time. So what we have here, again, is a prioritization and politicization problem. You put off the hiring of these things till you have that 2-week window so that you can say we shouldn't have to have a 2-week window to do it. It's just petty politics at that point. Because if you'd prioritized hiring teachers right out of the gate, because those 20 positions, they've allocated some of the funds towards 20 full-time teaching positions. Those 20 teaching positions cost $3.67 million, according to the article. Well, again, if you got nearly $20 million from the original $500 increase, that was after the governor's veto, you could have hired, 3.6 out of 20. You could have hired 40 teachers if it was a priority for you. But see, now you want to make political hay. It's not acceptable that the districts only have 2 weeks to hire these teachers. Now, interestingly enough, during his comments and after this was done, during the work session, the district made the statement just minutes before they received an update saying that all 20 positions were filled. Oh, we made it work. Oh, so what you're telling me was this was all theater. This was all theater. They're going to take the remaining $6.2 million and put it into so you got 27 new classroom teachers, $3.59 million, $2 million towards teacher retention and recruitment, $160,000 towards an English language summer school program, and $540,000 towards high dose tutoring, which would include 3 to 4 tutoring sessions a week for kids. Well, there you go. Of course, that doesn't equal out to $6.2 million, but what are they going to do with the rest of those funds? But this was the kicker. The Anchorage the Anchorage Education Association says there is still a ways to go in directing more funds to the classroom. They still, again, saying the quiet part out loud, there's still more ways to go. Now, they seem to be talking specifically here about making sure that the increased public funding should go directly into the classroom. They agreed with Governor Dunleavy that the classroom is where we add the most value. Now, if that's the case, then this is something that should be directed directly at the school boards because they're the ones that control where that money goes. If it really belongs in the classroom, then you guys have the power to focus it there. You could say, this increase doesn't go to administrative. It doesn't go to overhead. It doesn't go. You are the ones that make that decision. So get with the program. But again, this fight ain't over, folks. This fight is not over on education. I guarantee you. They're already gearing up for the next. And of course, they'll have the political cover of, we still can't talk about policy because the education working group, the education policy group, they met in August and they still are working on their recommendations. So this whole next session, they're using it as a dodge to not have to talk about policy because the policy committee now they'll release their findings a year and 5 months from now. Can you see how this is going to play out? Can you see it? Or is it just me? I'm asking for a friend. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We return with more in just a moment. Jeremy Bynum going to be joining us from Ketchikan up at the top of the hour. We'll be back right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Where were we? Yeah, they gavelled out until the 30th. Somebody asked if they had gavelled out. But yeah, no, they have adjourned until the 31st of August. So we'll see. I mean, will they just continue this technical session up until January? I don't even know if they can do that. But let's see. Is the summer English program for students or teachers? Asked David. It's, pretty accurate, said Chris, but I find it simpler to just call it fake news when I was talking about the political theater of all that stuff. Yeah, the deceit is baked in, says Kim. Yeah, they already know what the policy recommendations are going to say, but they use it as a political foil to say, well, we can't possibly talk about policy because the group hasn't come in, and they're going to be a year before, so we just need the money now, and we'll talk about that policy down the road. Can you even hear about it? Frank says, at least I never hear about how hard the decisions that were made by the Anchorage School Board. Well, it's because the Anchorage School Board hasn't made any hard choices, dude. I mean, they did close schools in Fairbanks and Anchorage. They're building new schools. Okay. Even though they're only 50%, I mean, I know you got an axe to grind with the whole school district there at Fairbanks, but I mean, they have made some hard cuts. Not enough, but they have done some work. Probably more work than most of the school districts in the state. So, give some of them a little break, will you? Okay. I wanted to get to this article. Alaska legislature launches executive task force. I'm sorry. Legislature education task force. I'm looking for this article. It's back from the early July. I apparently missed it. Here it is. Right there. Got it. Okay. So, recommendations. Recommend. Thank you. It's charged with making recommendations before the 35th legislature convenes in January of 2027. Wow. The task force will present recommendations in a report on the first day of the January 2027 session. Oh God. Okay. All right. We'll see where this goes. Thank you for bringing Chris. I appreciate you bringing that up right there. 2027. Yeah. What they hired clean crews in the Army more excessive as a state legislator. Okay. Let me scroll backwards here. Both task forces, says Chris, are fake news. Chris is using that loaded term. Fake news. Fake news. Well, that's political kabuki is what it is. That's all it is. Just political shenanigans. Yeah, and how much for all the stuff to get down there to the special session? Kevin says, not so special technical session, probably $5 or $6 grand for tickets, just for the tickets alone. And then they've got to stay at least overnight, right? Before they go back. But I mean, I guess Gary Stevens has been there the whole time, hanging out, doing whatever in Juneau. I don't know. Anthony, always one of the wittiest ones in the room. Dub Levy's efficacy can be directly correlated to his cool jacket game. He was always in some snazzy jacket and kicking butt previously. Now he's in plain coats and acting all milquetoast. Somebody needs to get this man a frilly jacket. He's not wrong. There was just like, he looks a little worn around the edges. I mean, I'm sure it's exhausting. Don't get me wrong. But seriously, find some gumption there, Governor. Chris's label is accurate and more amusing than me calling a political theater just fake news. Okay, well, all right. It is what it is. It is what it is. Okay. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew, I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
So, you know what's interesting on this whole thing? Chris did point me to that direction, and it's true. It's true. In an article by Corrine Smith back in early July, in the Alaska Beacon, they talk about the Education Task Force. I don't know how I missed this article. So thank you, Chris, for bringing it to my attention. But basically, they talk about how in this article, this task force, which was created by HB 57, which, by the way, gives the minority zero input on who's on the committee. It's all the speaker. The speaker gets to choose who's on the committee. Zero input from the minorities at all. And the committee is going to be made up of, basically this perfect storm of NEA, former teachers, former, union reps. I mean, those kind of things. It's going to be Mike Cronk and Himshoot, Loki Tobin, Justin Ruffridge, Jesse Keel, and Andy Story. Okay. So all of these people who have some kind of, tie to but anyway, the key part here is that the recommendations, the task force is charged with making recommendations before the 31st Alaska State Legislature convenes in 2027. And the final sentence of the story, the task force will present recommendations in a report on the first day of the January 2027 session, the same month the task force sunsets. So they're going to spend a whole year. Okay. Sorry. They're going to spend a whole year vacillating, going back and forth, hand-wringing, doing all this stuff, all for the cameras. Meanwhile, any further talk of education funding will all come back to, we can't make any policy decisions because the task force is still meeting and we don't have their recommendations. That's what we're, So this task force, according to Chris in the chat room, is fake news. Yes, essentially fake news, political theater, whatever you want to call it. Everybody likes the fake news, apparently, in the chat room. Everybody seems to like that. That better than me saying political theater. Everybody likes fake news. Fine, fake news. It's fake news. The dog and pony show, says Ken. Yeah, maybe that's it. It's a dog and it's just fake news. They're going to use it as a weapon against everybody. We can't talk about policy. Okay. So it should be an interesting discussion. By the time this is all said and done, it'll be a year from now, and we'll hear more. All right, let's move over to one final thing here on education, and the latest is this one's from Fairbanks. In an email to parents and caregivers, says Alec Bengal over at KTUU, dated the 14th of August, the Fairbanks School District clarified its policy that student information is never shared with non-emergency government agencies unless there's proper legal documentation, such as a judicial warrant or court order. Now, you might ask yourself, why on earth would you send out a letter about that of all things? Well, apparently the letter reads, "Dear parents and caregivers, you may have heard about recent immigration and custom enforcement activity in Fairbanks. I want to assure you that our district is committed to providing a safe, welcoming, and high education space for every student, regardless of race, color, national origin, citizenship, or immigration status." Well, that's good to know. I mean, even though it's being funded with local taxpayer dollars, I guess. Anyway, we follow Administrative Regulation 1410, Interagency Cooperation Visit for Government Officials, which outlines how we respond to requests from non-emergency government agencies. Under federal law, we protect the privacy of our students and families. Student information is never shared without proper legal documentation, such as a judicial warrant or court order. Our focus remains on supporting our students and ensuring schools are safe, inclusive spaces for learning. Thank you for your trust. Luke Menard, Superintendent. So apparently there was some fear that ICE was going to the schools and they were going to, I mean, great, all that and stuff. I just can't see that. I just don't see why this is such a big, if you knew this was coming, right? And if you're not here legally, although what's ironic is that most of the times in a lot of the cases that we're hearing is that, the parents came here illegally and they may still be illegal, but a lot of times they've born children here who are now U.S. citizens through birthright citizenship. And so it's ironic that the students, what they're trying to protect here is the students, but generally speaking, the students are all citizens. So it really wouldn't matter what information that they had because they're all citizens anyway. Anyway, I just thought this was interesting. It was not as strong a stance as you saw taken in Anchorage, where they were going to continue to cling to their DEI and all these other things at the threat of the loss of federal funding. But it is a way to, soothe parents' fears out there, because I'm sure in Fairbanks there's a lot of parents who are worried that ICE raids are going to happen in the school. Although again, the kids are normally, usually the kids are citizens and the parents are not. So it is what it is, but you can rest assured that the Fairbanks North Starborough School District will not give your information to any government official, unless of course your kid wants to change their name and their gender, and then they'll give it to whoever they want. That's just, there's a line there, but they won't cross it. Guaranteed, they won't cross it. It'll be fine. Okay, we're up against top of the hour. We got more coming up. Jeremy Bynum is our guest in hour 2. So we'll be joining him in just a minute. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll be back with more right after this. If you got to go and go to work, I know some of you, it's work time. Be kind, love one another, and live well. All right? We'll see you guys in a bit. Back with more. Okay. Ooh, baby. Let me go back up here and see what's happening. He can just farm engagement talking about taxes. Is that what you think? I'm just trying to farm engagement. That's all I'm trying to do here. I mean, I'm trying to get more people involved, but it's not like I have a plan. Maybe I should have a plan. Maybe Fat Ray, you can help me develop a plan to get more engagement, to talk about what people really want to talk about. I watched a video a few months ago about, if I really wanted to blow up my YouTube or my Facebook channel, that what I need to do is go search out whatever the hottest search terms are out there and then start making videos on those hot search terms and everything. And I'm like, but what if I don't care about what the hot search term is? I mean, what if it doesn't spark? What if it doesn't bring me joy? What do I do then? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Public schools too big to fail, yet all the kids are failing. Not all the kids, but a big chunk of them for sure. ASD on ice. ASD remains committed to following established protocols when interacting with law enforcement, including federal immigration authorities. While complying with all applicable laws, we are steadfast in protecting the learning environment and the rights of our students and families. Any immigration official seeking to enter ASD property will be required to present a judicially signed warrant. This warrant will then be reviewed by ASD's legal counsel to ensure it meets the necessary. Okay, so it's a big, long thing there. Okay. Oh, great. I mean, it's just something to know. Brian said that's some virtue signaling by the Fairbanks School Board right there. And that's kind of what I got out of this, was that it was a kind of a nothing burger that gave them some political cover to be able to say, well, look, we're doing this for you. It's virtue signaling. That's a good call on that. Yeah. Melissa says, specifically by 2 members, says Melissa. She said specifically some virtue signaling by 2 of the members. She's the president of the school board there. Yeah. You're the worst about reading the whole chat and taking things in You're the worst about reading the whole chat and taking things in context. Is that in context or out of context? Because part of my problem is that sometimes I'm reading a comment that's 5 minutes old and I don't know exactly what they're referring to. And other times they're replying to somebody else and I can't see there. It's not staggered in like a reply tree. I just see the things as they come in. So you might be replying to somebody else that you can see and I can't see what you're replying to, kind of thing. Anyway, it's interesting stuff. All right. Jeremy Bynum. Jeremy Bynum is in the chat, is in the green room, drinking all my virtual coffee and eating all my virtual donuts. So before we get too far along here, let's do some audio testing, shall we? Let's get into the old audio testing category here. See if we can get him all squared away to make sure that the sound is working and everything. And we'll do that right now. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good, doing well. Good morning.
Good.
Wow,
you sound
is that
like
okay on the volume there? Are we good with
yeah,
that?
no, you sound like you're right next door. So it's good. And by next door, it means I can see Russia from my house. It sounds like you're right next door. It's all good.
So just a quick question for you. So if for some reason we get disconnected, just jump back into this link. Is that what I need to be doing?
Yeah, just jump. This link is a permanent link. So you can just jump back in and it'll dump you back in. So if your internet, poops out or something, you can just click the link again and I'll bloviate until you return. We'll figure it out. It'll be good. So, all right. Well, I'll be right back to you here in just a minute. We are about 2.5 minutes from the start of the show, and then I will we'll get things ready to rock and roll. So thanks for coming on and hold up. Whoops, hold the line. There you go. All right. Jeremy knows how this works. He's watched the show a few times, so we can do it. Oh, Fat. This is so hysterically funny. So I just said, Fat Ray, you're the worst about reading the whole chat and taking things out of context, says Fat Ray. I thought he was talking to me. And so I made a comment about how I can't see all the replies. And he says, I was replying to someone else. That's classic. I could see Chris's chat, but I can't see it in regards to whether or not you're replying to it. And so I'm seeing a full, I can't show you anyway, there's a whole, I can see all the chat, but it's a whole thing. Okay. We'll see here. I'm scrolling backwards here. See if there's anything else. There we go. Okay. All right. I'm good at bloviating. Yeah. Thank you. I think. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, but we'll see. Miguel says lost sound, or is it only me? I think it might be only you because nobody else is squawking about it. So maybe hit the refresh button. All right. Well, here we go. Let's get this thing going on, shall we? Hour 2 is dead ahead. Jeremy Bynum, our guest from Ketchikan, House District 1. We'll return. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
Sounds just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
I got to turn on the mic. Hey there, hi there, ho there. Welcome back to the Michael Duke Show, Wednesday edition of the big radio show, Hump Day. That's right. We could see the weekend from here. Firearms Friday's right around the corner. Robin Sandoval will be our guest on Friday, a girl with a gun. And then tomorrow, State Senator Rob Myers will be joining us to talk about SJR 14 and more, plus other potential guests in hour 1. Meanwhile, here we are on the second hour of the Wednesday show, broadcasting across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator, or out on the internet with our friends. So we got about 60 of our closest friends on Facebook, YouTube, and Rumble out there watching with us this morning in the chat room. Come on out and join us there. Our hour 2 guest this morning is Jeremy Bynum. Jeremy is the Republican legislator from Ketchikan down there in House District 1, and he's been kind enough to come on with us today. I invited him on the program. I see him sometime. He makes comments in the chat room. He watches the show occasionally, and I invited him on to talk about the veto override and the education as a whole and the state of the state and well more. It's a good chance to get down in. We do that again. Let's get to it. Here we go. Jeremy Bynum joins us this morning on the program. Good morning, sir. Thank you for coming on board.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show. Really look forward to having a good conversation. And it's always difficult.
It is. It can be difficult sometimes, but I promise it will be the most painless. It'll be the most painless discussion. It'll be the most painless, tough discussion you've had all day. How about that? That'll be that's my little caveat there for it.
Michael, I've been a basketball official for over 20 years, so I think I can endure a little bit of pain. And,
there you go.
We're trained up for that.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Okay. Well, let's get started. Okay. The first reason, of course, that I had asked you on initially was, of course, the veto override. This was the big news. We had members of the minority in both the House and the Senate. The minorities vote for the overriding the governor's veto. The ADN actually had a pretty good article here where they basically sat down with all the members of the minority, the 10 minority members, and got all but one of them to comment on this. And your comment was that you would vote to override because if lawmakers fail to override the governor, the decision to raise the base student allocation means raising the maximum contribution that local governments can provide to their district. And if legislators didn't restore the funding, the local government could simply increase their local contribution, putting more of the cost of public schools on local taxpayers. So this was your reasoning, that it was basically the state's responsibility to pick up that slack and not the local communities. So could you expound on that a little bit and your decision-making process leading up to that veto and that kind of decision there?
Yeah, no problem. We really got to look at, there's a few things that we were talking about. And the first one is HB 57 and the actual bill. And then there was a veto override on that. And then the second thing that we had is we had the special session where 2 vetoes were brought forward. One was SB 183, and then the appropriation portion of the funding for education. So the article is really talking about the second portion of that bill. And the conversation I'd had with Mr. Brooks was before we actually went onto the floor. And it was more of a conversation talking about the fiscal impact of if the veto were to be sustained, and then also if it were to be overturned. And, unfortunately, sometimes when you're giving a discussion with somebody, you can't pick and choose what they put in the article. I don't think the article really fully described my position on the actual appropriations portion. And we could probably talk for the full hour on that. But the long and short of it is that the governor, he made a line item reduction in the language section of the budget. And when he did that, he struck out a bunch of language and he put the amount in the budget to an amount certain. The governor didn't reduce the BSA. The BSA is established by statute. That was settled in HB 57. What he did is he put that amount certain, which was an approximate reduction of about $200. Now, obviously, it's approximate because you base that off of previous year's counts. You got to look at new counts coming up. So it's an approximation reduction. And what that did, and what I was talking with Mr. Brooks about, was when the governor made that decision to reduce the amount of money going into the public education fund, there is a provision in statute that also allows local municipalities that are city and boroughs to fund to a local maximum. And there was a lot of discussions that I'd had with the department, with Ledge Legal, to ask the very critical question: does the amount for the maximum local change by the reduction that the governor made? And the answer that I ultimately got back from legislative legal is that the amount that the maximum local contribution can be is established by statute. And that was the 6660 number. When I contacted DEED about that, I asked, hey, how are you guys going to interpret this? And they said, we're going to have to get back to you because we didn't consider that this potentially could have an impact on the maximum local. And ultimately, I got a response back to them that they said it's the statute. And so the big question then is why does this create a problem for us? And nobody talked about it. And that's what I was talking with Mr. Brooks about. I said, nobody talked about what actually happens. So right now, the state of Alaska is dealing with the disparity test. We know that for FY28.
Right.
And the language that the governor struck out of the budget would address that specific issue in the event that we fail the test and we are unable to get it overturned. Okay, that's the $81 million people are talking about.
Right.
And there's been a lot of discussion about that. But what wasn't discussed is what happens in FY28, 2 years from now, when school districts in FY28 backfill what the governor cut in the budget in their school budgets, because the districts would be able to backfill what the governor cut from the local contribution portion. And nobody talked about that. That was my conversation with Mr. Brooks to really say there is a potential in FY28 that we will have a failure, and that failure will not be because of in-kind contributions like we're arguing about now for FY26. It will be because we intentionally reduce the amount of money going to the school districts from the state through the education fund. So that's really what my conversation was. And then we talked a lot about the continuous cost shift from the state to the local city and borough school districts, and what that cost shift does to our local taxpayers. And so that's really what that conversation was about. The article didn't fully capture it.
Right. No, it's very brief, and I'm glad that you were able to expound on that a little bit more. I had not considered that component. Obviously, they didn't consider that component when they were looking at it, as they had to go back and look at it. But it raises some interesting questions. Now, I know that I've seen you in the chat room occasionally when Brad Keithley was on. So I don't know if you saw Brad's discussion on local contributions having a greater effect on education and on the control of education. But I mean, is there something to that in that regard? I mean, he's pointing out, and I mean, I've got the chart right here that you could take a look at, that basically shows that, you know, we are that we here in the state of Alaska, our local contributions are about half of what the national average is for local contributions. And that, you know, this has forced local communities to take a deeper grip on what's going on, because they are funding and they have more skin in the game, I guess I would say, in that regards. Have you seen that? Have you talked about that at all, or looked at it?
Absolutely. And you know, that's a good policy question to be had, is what do we want our local communities to contribute to our system of education, and how much should that be, and how much involvement do they have with their local school boards when they're, you know, you're spending your local tax dollars as opposed to a foundation formula money coming from the state. As you're probably aware, the Ketchikan Gateway Borough was part of a big legal case with the state that basically had said, hey, we have a disproportionate share of what we're putting into schools through city and boroughs versus, say, REAAs, which are fully funded by the state. And there's been a long-standing conversation about, you know, how much should our local communities be paying? And I'm not opposed to our local communities paying, but our system across the state should reflect an equal contribution. Now, I understand that you're going to get into some areas of the state that are unorganized, and they absolutely have no tax base. They have no ability to pay, and I get that. But you know, when you back up and you look at like the overarching broad policy that we have in the state on how we fund education, it definitely is something that we could have a conversation about. And then we would see how much involvement do we see from our local communities on wanting to see our schools do well.
One of the things that seems to be missing from the conversation, and has been missing, I think, the entire time that we've been discussing this over the last 12 to 18 months, the education funding question, is the children, is the outcomes, you know, that we've gotten so stuck on. What is the magic number? And this started back when it was 14, and then it was 18, and then it was 1969, and then it was whatever. We finally, they got down to the 700. But, and of course, anytime somebody would then want to talk about things like, well, what about some policy changes to increase or to show that we're going to improve our outcomes, it became essentially, shut up and give us our money. We'll talk about policy later, which to me is another way of basically saying, this is about the money and the jobs and the employment and the system. It's not about the kids. It's not about the outcome for the kids. And I think that's been lost in this whole discussion of, you know, and I know that people have argued, well, the NEEP test is but the NEEP test at least has been consistent across states and across years. So at least it's an apples to apples comparison. And when we continue to fall in that same NEEP testing, it is at least an indicator that we're not going in the right direction. Am I wrong, or are we forgetting the kids in this whole discussion in your mind?
Well, I mean, obviously, there's we can politicize what's happening from the high levels of what people are doing and advocating for education from one side or the other. But, you know, I can only speak from my experience of being on the ground. You know, I spent 4 years on a borough assembly, and myself and my mayor worked really hard to try to hold our school district accountable when it came to budgets. Worked really hard on that. You know, I was a lone dissenting voice on my assembly voting no on a budget because they didn't provide all the required information. And then we would push back against the school district, and we would say, you know, how is it possible that the school districts are doing what they're doing? And we would reach out to DEED and say, we need some help with this. And so now that I'm obviously into this position I'm in now, and, you know, I'm spending a lot of time going into the schools and talking to teachers. And one thing that is for certain from everybody I've talked to is that our teachers and our paraprofessionals and the people working in our schools care about our kids. My school board, when I go talk to them, they care about our kids. The community leaders care about our kids. And so we want to see success. But the bigger question that we've not asked when we start talking about policy, we talk about, overarching policies that we want to see in legislation, but we forget about like, what is our system and how is it established and how do we hold people accountable? And so the other day I was on another radio show and I asked the host, I said, if we could put forward a law that would create oversight and have accountability measures in place, would you agree that you would want to see that law? And it was, is that something you'd want to see? And I think everybody, when I ask that question, they say, well, absolutely. We need accountability in our school districts. Having a 45% chronic absenteeism, no wonder why we're having problems, right? And so when I ask that question, they say, absolutely. And I say, well, believe it or not, we already have that law. Alaska Statute 1407, the legislature said, we want to have oversight of our school system. And who is responsible for that? The Department of Education and Early Development is responsible for the oversight of our school system. They're there to make sure that they're adopting and recommending plans and, administering and evaluating grants. They're there to provide advocacy and advisory and consulting services to our school districts. They're there to make sure that they are trying to deal with the absentee issue. They're there to make sure that our students are performing, or they're supposed to be. And so as we move forward, when we go away from this idea of like, where are we at with funding, because that's a full conversation all to itself, we want to see our kids achieve. And so my goal as we move forward is to say, how do we look forward and work with the administration and the department who's responsible for oversight to ensure that they're gonna help our schools achieve. And it's really difficult to say. So you ask me, say, hey, how do we have accountability? And I'm going to push back and say, we have statute that says the department is responsible for holding these districts accountable. And they have to start doing that. And they have to work with the legislature and inform us of what they need. Michael, I was on, I'm on finance, and I'm also was on the education subcommittee for finance. And I try to have a really good working relationship. I'm new in the building. I want to have a good working relationship with the administration and all the departments. But I don't recall seeing a big push coming from the department saying that we are short on, all these funding mechanisms to ensure that we're going to start holding our school districts accountable. And this is what I need. And, as a legislator that appropriates dollars, that's what you need to hear from the departments when they need resources. And I'm not talking about the school districts. I'm talking about D.
And you're not necessarily talking about even financial things. You need mechanisms to hold them accountable, is what you're saying, like things in statute or pieces of legislation that say you will, school district, listen to what the deed is saying and you will give deed what they need, kind of thing. You need those teeth in that language, because that's part of the problem is these school districts kind of can go rogue at any time. And unless deed can hold them accountable, that's part of the problem we're dealing with.
Well, I think that, as a legislature, we've given them that authority through Alaska Statute 1407. And the other thing that we've done is there's a massive section of regulation, because the legislature really cedes our direct oversight to the department to say, go oversee this for us and create regulations to do that. So there's in the Alaska Administrative Code, Title 4, it's a full book of regulatory oversight measures for our school districts and trying to tell the school districts what they need to be doing. We could sit here and talk for 2 hours about what kind of support mechanisms that are supposed to be there from the department through regulatory measures. And then we also have the state school board. Now, the state school board is also responsible for ensuring that there's oversight. They've been given direct, the state school board has been given direct authority to establish regulations, to work with the department, take their recommendations, and start saying, hey, why aren't our kids performing in our schools?
Right.
And so, I want to start saying we have the mechanisms already in place to create that oversight and have accountability. And it's called our department. And
I want to talk about the failure points there that we're seeing right now, then, because if they have the authority, then something is still not working right. And I want to talk about that, but we are up against the break. And so we're going to continue here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Jeremy Bynum is our guest. We're going to continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll be back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, continuing now. Jeremy Bynum in the room with us here during the break. I'm sorry, I'm just reading Ken's comment. Ken, I don't think that's right, quite honestly. I mean, I don't know where you get your numbers, but even if it was true, just because somebody has behavioral medication doesn't mean that they belong in an institution. So I think you're way out of line there on that one. Kevin McCabe says, if they care about the kids, why do they never, ever, ever talk about them? All they talk about is teacher pay. If they cared about kids, they would be talking about policy, and they would be supporting policy. HB 57 has crap for policy changes, and it's really kind of more of a gilding of policy changes or lip service to policy changes in a lot of ways. But what's your thought on that, Jeremy?
Well, I would say that, we've had a long debate about HB 57 and was it a perfect bill? And the answer is no. One thing I don't really want to do is I'm not going to get into a big debate with another representative online here. Myself and the representative, we have long conversations about this type of thing, but I'm not going to do it on the public airways. But specifically about 57, we worked. We were working from a position where we are in the minority, and we are in the minority in the House, and we are in the minority in the Senate. And there's a couple things that are true. Number one is that, we're not in charge of the agenda, but we were working, the Republican minority was working very hard to say, how do we get to a place where we can get some stability in our school districts? There's a lot of debate about the amount of money that was put into the BSA. Ultimately, that amount was picked well before I became a legislator. That was done in the 33rd legislature, and nobody seemed to have a massive problem when we were spending money with no accountability at all in the last legislature and saying that we're providing what the school districts need. We want to also make sure that what we're spending now isn't any different than what we spent in the previous FY and the previous FY before that on the overall spend of UGF spend. So we'd start talking about policy. I'm like, yeah, I would love to have all the policies in the world. I want to support the policies the governor has and worked hard on that stuff. When we talk about trying to get policy, you should go back and watch the floor debate on education. And the minority members offered a whole bucket of policy-driven things that will improve outcomes in our schools, directly improve outcomes.
Right.
I'm not talking about open enrollment or talking about charter school authorizers at the state level. I'm talking about actual policies that have where the rubber meets the road in the classroom, allowing teachers to teach. And, there was an amendment offered on the floor where we said, hey, we want teachers to have the right to teach in their classrooms, give them some authority to teach in their classrooms and control their classrooms, because there's a problem there. And immediately it got pushback from saying, don't touch my kids. And it got turned into some perverted conversation about harming children. I'm like, nobody said we were harming children. We said we want to give teachers a right to control their classrooms and teach. And, the pushback on that and the conversation got twisted from our own members on that. And so we have to have an honest conversation about real policy that's going to drive success in the classroom. And 57, there's some things in there I think that are good policy. It's a good start. We got stability and funding. Is it perfect? No. Does it mean that we stop working for good outcomes for our kids? Absolutely not. I think the minority members, and by the way, the majority of Republicans and the majority of Republicans in the minority voted for that bill. So if we're talking about what are the majority of Republicans doing? We voted for that bill. We supported that bill. And then we also said we support working toward having other policies that are going to directly improve our classrooms. And we can prove it because you can go watch the floor debates for hours for the 25 to 100 amendments that we offered to say we want to have better outcomes in schools. And so the conversation is not over. And, because we supported it 57, the majority of us did, doesn't mean that we're saying that we're done talking about how do we get performance. But,
right.
57 isn't the only thing.
We're going to jump back in. Here we go.
Yeah.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That's just mean, man. That's just mean. All right, we got Jeremy Bynum in the house here. State rep from District 1 down in Ketchikan. We've been talking about education. Jeremy was just talking about how there is accountability already baked into the system. And so through the deed and the State Board of Education and everything else that we're talking about policies. Jeremy, during the break, was just talking about how, that there was dozens of amendments on the floor that were offered by minority Republicans that would have had a direct impact on policy. And that was all shot down and riddled full of bullet holes or twisted in certain ways. But I guess my question then is, Jeremy, if the mechanisms are there or the power, according to statute 1407, is already in place, where's the failure point? What's not happening then? What is not going on? And how would you, if you were king for a day, how would you fix that?
Well, I mean, obviously, we have to have a better conversation with the administration and with the department about what it is that they need to make sure that our schools are going to be succeeding. And, we just need to have honest conversations in our committees. And we also need to have those conversations directly. And so, like I said, I want to come into this thing. I'm new to the legislature. I'm coming in with a different perspective. Coming from the community. I've not had longstanding relationships with the department or with the administration about, with going back. And so you got to try to create some kind of trust there. And so I'm not here to throw the department under the bus or the state school board under the bus, but I'm here to say I need to understand, where we're failing. And so that means working hard with my colleagues to start asking some really tough questions and have some level of report back to the legislature about why we aren't performing. And this isn't just with education that we need to have this conversation. I mean, you can look at this when we start talking about, across the board, what's happening with the Department of Transportation and the STIP, what's going on in corrections, what's going on in public safety. The list goes on. And so we have an obligation to ask the tough questions of the departments that we want to see performance. I mean, we want to see performance of our contracts with DOT, just like I want to see performance of the money we're spending in our education system. And we rely on the department to help us with that. And so do I have a magic wand? No, I don't have the magic wand. All I can do is commit that I'm going to work hard. And I'm going to encourage my colleagues to work hard to say we need to start working with the department to answer those questions of how do we get chronic absenteeism fixed? How do we get kids reading? How do we get kids being more successful in our schools? And so that's what I think we need to start doing. And I was just going to point out, we talk about, and I've heard this discussion about, well, look what other states are doing and how are they performing? And Mississippi's brought up a lot. Well, we need to understand, if you go look at the history of how Mississippi's corrected a lot of their issues in the education system, it didn't happen in 1 year or 2 years. It's been a decade of work. And the most substantial piece of legislation this legislature's passed to try to help with direct outcomes of our kids has been the READS Act. And that's only been in place a couple years. And so I expect the department to be coming to us and saying, we need more resources or authority to make sure that we're helping our districts achieve the goals that we wanted to set forward in the READS Act. And I think we've started to see some of those results coming forward with better improvements, but it takes time.
Well, and it does take time. I mean, it took almost 8 years to get the READS Act across the finish line, which is, frustrating. I mean, this is something that could have been helping, a whole generation of kids. And instead it took all this time just to get it over the finish line. And if every piece of this puzzle takes 5 to 8 years to get across the finish line. I mean, how many kids are going to fall through the cracks in the meanwhile? We need to accelerate this pace and figure it out for sure. I want to talk a little bit about the upcoming session and the continuing push for more education. We're already seeing it already in some of the verbiage, some of the comments and the public comments from the unions and some of the other people is that, well, this was a nice start, but basically we're going to be back next year looking for more. That this was a good beginning, but now we're gonna push harder. In your mind, as you look at this, is that a viable option? I mean, especially looking at the financial situation of the state and everything else. I mean, should we be expecting and would you be supporting another push for another increase this next session? Or should now we be looking at, now that they've got the money, now we should be looking at these other, like you said, the policy decisions, the Board of Ed, the deed and all this kind of stuff. Should we be looking at that component of it now that we funded the new, added this new funding? Should we be stalling any further funding discussions until we figure out the root cause of this other problem?
Well, I think that when we start saying this is what may be coming at us, I would say from my perspective, one of the things I committed to my school district before I came to Juneau and worked with them while I was on the assembly was to say, we want to provide them some level of certainty as we move forward. And my superintendent used to always say to me, he would say, well, we don't know what kind of funding we're going to get. And I always push back at him, and I'd say, we can look at the statute and you know exactly how much funding you're going to get within a percent or two, depending on your counts. And the COVID dollars that came in, and then the one-time funding that came in, those things all created a lot of instability with how we fund our school system. And so with us basically passing HB 57, I would say I've answered that question of given some level of certainty to our school districts, because they're on a different budget cycle than obviously the legislature is, and they need to make decisions earlier than what we actually give them as far as decisions. So that to me has been answered. And I would say that we need to start focusing on how do we make sure our kids are achieving in our schools. We need to work with the department to do that. But we also have a lot of other responsibilities, and education is one of them, one of the many. And I want this legislature to start focusing on, yes, we want to talk about continued policy, but we have a lot of other responsibilities that require financial resources, and we need to focus on that. Education shouldn't dominate our whole conversation. So what I hope we go into the next this next session in January is that we start saying, how do we get Alaskans back to work? How do we get our resource development moving forward? How do we make sure that a gas line is happening? If that is going to happen, that we can support it. How do we make sure that we have take advantage of the opportunities that are at hand? And those opportunities are for us to start getting people back to work and for Alaska to start producing again. That should be our primary focus as we move forward. And, when, like you said, okay, people are going to come advocate for more money. Absolutely, they're going to do that. I get people that want to come into my office all the time saying they want money for this or that. Education is no different than a lot of the other services, but we have limited resources and we need to prioritize those resources. And I think that for now, we have done the hard work to answer that question for now. And I want us to start focusing on getting Alaska back to work.
What you're talking about is kind of an overall fiscal plan, right? That's what you're really talking about, is to find a way to bring us, back on track and to care about what's happening in the private economy.
Absolutely. I mean, we want our, I want to see my community thrive because we have good paying jobs and we're producing things. And, we've got issues with housing. We've got issues with our transportation. We've got issues with our roads. We've got a whole slew of issues that we aren't talking about right now. And, I think we really need to kind of change our mindset that, yes, education is very important. It's important to my community, but so are all these other issues. And, that's what I want my focus to be as we move forward, is to say, I'm not forgetting about that, forgetting about making sure that we have accountability in our schools and that we want our kids to do well. I'm going to be bringing forward some ideas to help with career technical education, the technical readiness and career training program that I've been working on, that hopefully that bill will be pre-filed here pretty soon. We can talk about that kind of stuff to make sure our kids are ready for our Alaska workforce. But we got to have jobs, and those kids to go into those jobs. And so we better start focusing on our opportunities that we have, and that's called a resource development and our other economic opportunities in Alaska.
Representative Jeremy Bynum is our guest, state rep from District 1 down in Ketchikan. We are coming up on the final break. We're going to be back with more in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thicket radio. We continue right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we are in the break with Jeremy Bynum. Jeremy, you said something that I want to kind of circle back to that was, to me, very interesting. You said your superintendent came to you and said, well, we don't even know what we're going to get. We don't even know. And we've seen that kind of phraseology becoming more and more prevalent, that they want predictability, that they want stability, that they want to know what they're going to get. And you make a hugely valid point in a very simple way. All you have to do is look at the statute, look at how many kids you're predicted to have, and you'll know within a few percentage points how much money you're going to get. And see, this has been my complaint for a long time about what's going on in the various school districts around the state, is that instead of doing that and knowing and planning on that number and then saying, because that's basically preparing for the worst, hoping for the best, all your surprises will be happy ones, right? Because you're planning on the lowest. Here's what we know we're going to get. Anything above and beyond that is gravy, right? We know it, but instead they always go for the whatever the pie in the sky number is, or for the maximum. They always plan on the best case scenario instead of the worst case scenario. And that's part of the problem. There's no uncertainty. You're going to get this much based on this number of students, based on what you have right now. Why is there a question on this?
Well, I think that the reason there was a question is, it's obviously it's probably a study to itself, but when you look back and you go back over the last 5 years or so, at least I can speak from that because that's the length of my experience of dealing with local government and a school board and a school district, is that, we entered into this phase of COVID. There was a tremendous amount of money that flooded into the state, both into businesses, into people's pockets, and into the school districts. And we had a big change on how we were dealing with our education of our kids. And it really created this opportunity for parents to realize that, hey, maybe I want to do something different. But that's a different conversation. But the legislature then was saying, okay, we know that there's needs there, and they were giving one-time money, and then the one-time money be put in the budget, and then we wait until June or July, and then there'd be, a change to that. And so there was instability. The true fact of it is that school districts grew beyond their, they were spending more than they should have been. And my school district was exactly the same way. They were spending more money than they should have been. Had a lot of battles internally about that and publicly about, what should we be spending? What should budgets look like? How do we control, spending and making sure that money is going into the classroom? So there's a lot of instability when you start putting this one-time funding in and then saying, oh, we're providing what the school districts need. Well, school districts need to have their budget done by May. And so by putting that additional money in, it really created instability. And the one-time funding, I mean. So, I think we've solved that problem for now. And we gave a level of certainty through statute and said, this is what you're going to get. You need to appropriately plan for that. But, structurally in our school system, there's lots of other issues. We keep saying we want the money to go to the classroom and to teachers. Okay. Well, there's a big chunk of our money being spent in our school that goes to other than teachers. We got paraprofessionals in our schools, which are there because we have special needs programs, and we've got intensive special needs. And those programs are very expensive, and there's a lot of employees associated with them. So, we need to really take a step back and look at like what's actually happening in our system of education. And the only people that can really help us with that are people that are charged with that, and that's the deed. And I got lots of questions. We could probably do a show every week for the next 2 weeks and talk about these types of things and what's going on. But they have stability now in the sense that they know by looking at statute what they're going to get, and I say plan accordingly. Sure that they're going to come and want to say, hey, we want to advocate for more, and I'm going to say, look at the statute. This is where we're at financially. We can't afford to do more at this point. And that's the truth. We just can't. And so let's prioritize where we put our spending.
Well, and I agree with you that putting and focusing it into the classroom is important, but we have to really look at it. And there should be, maybe the Department of Ed should be defining what is classroom. I would assume that somebody who's working with special needs in the classroom, yes, that should be classroom. Now, should we have the entire IT department for the whole school, covered under classroom? No. Portionally, maybe. But again, maybe there needs to be that definition. And maybe we need to go back to that statute from 98, which was repealed here years ago, where they basically said that whatever was 70% has to go into the classroom. But we should have a definition of what is in the classroom. This is all important. To understand that, you have to understand what that means.
Well, I wholly agree with that.
30 seconds, by the way.
One other quick thing I was going to say, and maybe it's something we can talk about when we go back on air, is that when we talk about funding of education, it's not just what we're spending in the foundation formula. We have facilities that have $1 billion of backlog deferred maintenance across the state, and that is a scary issue.
Don't get me on deferred maintenance. That is the pet. You asked the chat room. That's the pet peeve right there.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Jumping back into it. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Okay, we are continuing now. One final segment. Jeremy Bynum is our guest. We were just talking about the importance of getting the money into the classroom. And to do that, we have to define what classroom spending is actually made up of. And then once we get outside of that argument, and where we're talking about base student allocation or the foundation formula, then we have to talk about other things like monies that are outside the formula, which apparently the news media treats like don't exist, but they do. There's plenty of money that's spent outside the formula that should be on things like infrastructure and things like that, where we've let some of these schools, and Jeremy mentioned deferred maintenance, some of these schools are investments that we made and we're letting them fall apart because we're deferring the money to pay for other things. It's total mismanagement of funds. Anytime you see that deferred maintenance, and Jeremy, you're saying it's a significant amount of deferred maintenance.
It is. It's not just school districts where we see this as a major issue. We got $800 million to $1 billion of deferred maintenance in the state when we talk about our school infrastructure. That's a crazy number, but that's not where it stops. Then you start talking about deferred maintenance in the university system. You start talking about deferred maintenance in the Department of Transportation and other facilities that we own in corrections. And the number is staggering. It is into the billions of dollars. And so, it was one of the most frustrating things that I dealt with when I was dealing with finance this past year is that you'd see departments coming in front of you. You'd have schools coming in front of you, and they'd be talking about all of the deferred maintenance that they have in their facilities. And I'm like, where's the plan for how we maintain these things and then replace them? And what the answer is that we don't have one. The state doesn't have one, a true one. And you start asking the question, well, how are we going to pay for these things in the future? And nobody has an answer that I've been able to get, a real concrete one anyway. And it's really it's a pretty disheartening thing to see is that we have lots of issues when it comes to deferred maintenance, and we don't have a plan on how we're going to solve that problem as of yet.
Well, and quite honestly, the plan should be to stop deferring the maintenance. What they're doing is they're prioritizing and saying this program, this X program is more important than making sure the roof of this building doesn't fall in, or that we have a heating system, or that we have something else. This is a prioritization issue. This is a mismanagement issue. If you've got deferred maintenance, it's because you decided something else was more important than maintaining the infrastructure that we've paid for and invested for, and now is falling down. That deferred maintenance needs to go away. If it's supposed to be there, if you've built the building, that maintenance plan should be built into it and baked in, and that money shouldn't be able to go anywhere but to maintenance.
Yeah, I agree. We shouldn't be building new infrastructure or new items in our inventories without having a plan on how you pay for them into the future and replace them. And so, that renewal and replacement is a big issue. It's something that I'll be pushing on as we continue forward into the next session as well. So there was one other thing I was hoping that I could talk about a little bit. I said we want to make sure that we're getting people back to work. That's going to be good for Alaska. But the other thing I wanted to talk about really quick is, HR1, the big, beautiful bill that had passed here through Congress, there was a provision in that bill that was talking about scholarship granting organizations. And it's a tax credit, a non-refundable tax credit that allows people to donate their own money and get a tax credit from the federal government. And the state of Alaska has an opportunity to opt into that. And I've talked with the Department of Education a little bit on that, and the administration to say, is this something that the governor can opt into? And if so, what is that going to look like and when? But this is definitely something we also need to be talking about, because it's a tremendous opportunity to help get scholarship organizations set up to help with other school costs. It helps with tutoring, it helps with sports programs, it helps with private schools, it helps with public schools. It's a good opportunity across the board that doesn't cost Alaskans a dime. So I'm hoping that as we move forward, that's something that the administration and the legislature will be talking about pretty heavily.
Well, I mean, I think in private investment in those kind of things, because that is kind of like the scholarships are usually a private thing. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I would love to see that. To move off education for a minute and to move into the upcoming session, we just had this discussion yesterday with Brad Keithley. It was a deep dive, although the numbers came out late last week, and I've been kind of teasing them all week. Is the fact that the projected oil production worldwide is going to cause a bit of a glut in oil, as they're saying right now. And we're going to see oil prices tumbling at the end of the year here going into next year, that by March, they're estimating that, crude is going to be somewhere in the mid 40s, which means ANS, that's Brent crude. So ANS is going to be somewhere in the high 40s to low 50s, which puts us at a significant disadvantage going into this next session, where this year's budget is already factored on $66 a barrel of oil, and we're expected to be into the low 50s by the end of the year, which means we're going to be upside down even just starting this session. Potentially $250 million, close to $250 million for this year, plus another $1 billion on top of the already projected budget deficit. So we're talking about potentially a $2 billion deficit next year. How do we get through that, Jeremy? And not just in the long term of like resource development. I understand that, but that's a long tail. How do we get through it next year?
Well, as we sit and we just look at next year, it's going to be really tough. And, one of the things, here's an example of how difficult it's going to be. So I put it forward an amendment to do an allocated cut. And it was an $80 million allocated cut. And it was basically a 3.5%, maximum 3.5% cut of non-formula, non-match money in the UGF budget. And 3.5% under those terms was about $80 million. And it worked out to be about 2.7 based on how I wrote the amendment. But that was a direct allocated cut amendment. It hit like 170, 200 lines of the budget to reduce. And that 3.5% cut basically came out to be about $80 million. So you can imagine, what that's going to look like when we try to bridge that gap. It's going to be very difficult unless if we start cutting programs and or we start foregoing federal match money or match money programs or formula programs. And so we got a lot of work to do. There's going to have to be some really, really tough decisions made on where we prioritize our funding. And that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, because we can't continue to do. I mean, we only have less than $3 billion in the CBR, so we can't even pay, spend our savings as we did in the teens. All that money that we could have. I mean, we could have gotten a handle on this monster back in the teens, but instead they spent $14 billion out of the CBR, and now it's just grown even more. It's going to be a question of not how, not do we cut, but how much can we get away with and still be, functional and make things work? And I think there could be some deep cuts, but this is going to force this issue, is it not?
It's going to absolutely force it. And, we use the term cut, and that's, practically what we're going to be doing. But I think I like to look at it from a different perspective. We need to prioritize. We're going to have to prioritize what we think is important, and the other things aren't going to get funded. And that's just the bottom line. And so, I think that we'll end up having, there'll be a request to reach into savings. I don't see how we're going to get around that to try to get us through the year, given oil prices. If they actually fall that low, that's going to be really difficult to try to develop a budget on that. I think Republicans have an opportunity to really say how we can lead in this space and talk about where we should be going. We'll be trying to work with the majority to say, this is our vision about how we get through this. And I think that gives us an opportunity to make some hard decisions or recommend hard decisions, but also demonstrate some leadership on how we can create stability in tough financial times. And I think we can do that.
And I think overall, we're down to the last 90 seconds, 2 minutes here, but I think overall we need a fiscal plan. And whether that's the fiscal policy working group plan or some other thing, but we need it, and we need it now. We can't study a study that we studied 10 times before to study the next study. It's coming. The wall is here. We have to have a plan, and we have to put it in place. I'll give you the last 60 seconds here to finalize your thoughts.
I think it's, we've got an opportunity, like I said, to work hard together and set a vision for where I think we need to go. And I think Republicans are up to the task to do that and work together. And there's lots of areas where we as a group have worked really hard together. You can go back and look at this last legislative session where we stood strong on talking about voter reform. We talked about defined benefits. We talked about lots of issues where we stood together and put forward a lot of great ideas. I think we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to be pushing to make sure that we're successful in a very difficult fiscal situation.
Well, I hope you're right. I hope we can come up with a plan, because I think next year is going to be pretty gruesome otherwise if we don't get all that squared away. All right, Jeremy Bynum, district rep for District 1 down in Juneau. Thank you so much for coming on board. It was a good conversation. I appreciate you being part of it.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to future conversations.
All right, hold the line for just a sec. Folks, we're out of time. We got to go. Thank you for being on the show. We will see you tomorrow with Rob Myers and more right here on the Michael Luke Show. Okay, Jeremy, I'll give you one final bite at the apple here in case there was something else you didn't touch on or anything else you wanted to circle back to. Now's your time.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate it. I thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. It really just shows that we've got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do as Republicans. We got a lot of work to do as a legislature to start figuring out how we're going to get us through this difficult fiscal situation that we're in. But that also means that we're going to have to work with the majority, and that's not a bad thing. I think we have great ideas, and we've got a lot of positive things that we can be working for. And I think that we're going to try to demonstrate that in this next legislative session, that we're ready to be at the table and be part of the conversation and provide good solutions. And I think it's going to require us all to work together to actually get through this next session because of the fiscal situation we're facing. So I really appreciate the format of your show. Had a lot of opportunity to have a conversation. Unfortunately, I wish it was another 2 hours. I love to talk and have conversations, and these things are all really complicated. And I know that when we're talking to the public out there on a radio show, it's really difficult to try to convey that. And I understand that. And so it's really a challenge for me. And this is an opportunity for me to try to figure out, how do you do that?
How do you concise it down? That's the problem. How do you take a very complex issue and try and concise it down to where the general public who's not versed in the issues can understand it? And that's what we try and do. And that's why I think this long form is really the only way to do it, for sure.
You're talking to an engineer, so we can come up with some real solutions now and spend a lot of time, but that's not what it's not the best way to always approach it when you're trying to.
I don't want to have to jack the engine out of my Corvette to change the spark plugs, Jeremy. Come on, engineer, those guys. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, it's good to talk with you. Appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks for the time to be able to talk, and I look forward to it in the future.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon. Thanks so much. All right, folks. That's it for us. We are out of time. We got to go. Tomorrow is a new one. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. We'll see you then.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.